Guru Nation, I got Ammon Rivera on. Guru Nation, his LinkedIn and website is underneath this video. And if you're listening, thank you very much. In the show notes, he's a fellow YouTuber, fellow podcaster. I actually discovered him a few months ago. He's a recruiter as well for these small to mid-sized biotechs and CROs. You guys know I love me some small biotechs. And I love me some small CROs. I think small is the new big. I like me some small sites too, guys. Everybody goes for the large names, the household names. Oh, I want to work for IQVIA. I want to work for Pfizer. There's nothing wrong with that, right, Ammon? But I think the small companies are kind of where it's at. And it was so nice finding you on YouTube because I was looking up an interview I did with Brian Culley, the CEO of Lineage Cell Therapeutics, because a client was asking me, like, hey, where's that interview you did? So I don't have them saved. So I had to search for it just like you guys would. And I found mine, but I also found yours. Ammon, so it was nice to see a fellow YouTuber interviewing these biotech CEOs out there. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Dan. I like you said, I run a YouTube channel and a podcast. Truth be told, to all your listeners out there, my YouTube channel is not popping yet, right? It's pretty new, but I launched a podcast a couple of years ago. So if any of you like to listen to long form podcasts, I've got some great interviews, over 60 interviews out there with CEOs, leaders of biotech, small biotech companies. And, hey, I've done some business with IQVIA before as a recruiter. I actually have helped place a couple contractors there before in their drug safety team. But yeah, I would say definitely I like that term, small is the new big. There's so much innovation taking place within the small biotech companies, and they're really making some progress. There's a lot of waves being made by small biotech, and, it's a very interesting topic.
And it's fast. Like the thing about these smaller companies is you can progress, like you can grow with them, and they're growing at a faster rate. So logically, your career will also grow at a faster rate if you stick with them. The inverse is also true. I mean, they could fail at a faster rate. The
Hmm.
problem is you won't fail at a faster rate also because you're gaining experience this whole time. And unless you're working for a company like Theranos, where you basically get a scarlet letter for working with them, I mean, that's extremely rare. Even if they fail, your career is still growing and your responsibilities are also climbing. So now you can go to another company and just keep doing the whole thing, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned Theranos. For those of you in the diagnostics world, you have to deal with something like that, right? But
Did you do
you know,
recruiting for Theranos?
no, I did not do any recruitment for Theranos. I actually tend to work more with drug development companies. So, the diagnostic side of the world, I do have some clients in diagnostics, but they also have a drug development side of their business, the therapeutic side, which they're really focused on growing. But it's I think a career in biotech right now for individuals looking to move up, there's so many avenues you can go, right? You've got the regulatory affairs side, you've got the clinical operations side, which would tie very well into the clinical research side of things. You've got the preclinical work that needs to be done, and that a lot of clinical research background is very, very important in that area. And then you have the medical side of things. You have clinical development, you have pharmacovigilance and drug safety, and in pharmacovigilance, drug safety, you have the medical side and the operational side, which is interesting because you find RNs, you find you know pharmacists that go into that side of things, and then you usually find physicians obviously go into the medical side of that. So, and that's just a few of the functions. Those are the main functions I've spent my career so far in recruiting in biotech in the areas that I've recruited on. So it's they're moving quickly, and what's interesting is that usually large pharmaceutical organizations do want to create partnerships with these. Sometimes they come in and want to outright buy and take over an organization. But what I've seen, for example, in the case with Brian Culley and Lineage Cell Therapeutics, is that they've been able to still maintain the sponsorship of the clinical trial or the asset, and at the same time do a partnership with a larger organization that's able to infuse cash, versus going the VC route, right now they're partnering with a larger organization that has that background. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a not just lucrative for long-term career development, but for career development period, it's a great place to be, I think.
Yeah, it is. I know somebody who she's a good friend of the show. She went from study coordinator at a small site to a small biotech, and they actually hired a big CRO to do the whole monitoring of the study. And this is a girl who wanted to be a CRA forever.
Mhm.
And now she's like the boss of those people without ever having been those people because she's at the sponsor side. So sponsor pays the bills, right? Like
Mhm.
none of the CRAs at the CRO necessarily care or even ask her like, "Oh, what's your credentials?" That's not how it works. You know, you're the sponsor, you're telling them what to do. And so it's that example right there kind of illustrates like this whole small is the new big thing. I mean, I really think it's like a hack to grow your career quickly.
Mhm. Yeah,
What
absolutely.
I have so many questions from candidates. They love when I get recruiters on. So I got some unique candidates. I got one. I have a lot of international medical graduates, right?
Mhm.
Um, well, let's start with them maybe first because it's a large segment of the audience. What do you think, like an IMG? Do you see biotechs or CROs looking for these kind of people?
Absolutely, I do. What I see though is it's their experience that they have that allows them to flourish within the biotech world. Sponsors in a perfect world, a sponsor. So, for example, let's say you're working with an oncology, a company developing oncology treatments. They want a US trained oncologist, right? And in some situations, they may need that, right? But usually that's going to be, especially as the leadership levels get higher and higher, they're definitely going to put an emphasis, right? But I have worked with plenty of international medical graduates, physicians especially, on the drug safety and pharmacovigilance side of things, right? Where they're reviewing serious adverse events, they're doing the ICSR reports, they're learning then how to do signal detection, they're learning how to then do aggregate reporting, DSURs, PSURs, these kinds of things, and they become very valuable because that medical background doesn't matter where it's from, right? As long as they're a physician and they know how to evaluate a patient from a medical standpoint, it's valuable to a biotech company, or a pharmaceutical organization, even larger organizations. So I would definitely say that they do look for that, but what they really look for though is experience, right? And so you've got to figure out how you can maybe pivot your career from being, maybe if you're on a site, you're doing clinical site management, to figuring out how you can pivot into gaining some of these skills that a sponsor would look for in someone that's an international medical graduate.
Yeah. How important is it transferable skills? I mean, you just said, experience at the end of the day is what matters. I completely agree. Problem is a lot of people watching, they don't have that experience,
Right.
but they do have the education. They might be IMGs, they might be PhDs. Do they have to take a pay cut initially in or like a step backwards to go two steps forward? Or are transferable skills enough for them to maybe get lucky and get their first shot somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't want to be the definitive voice on this, right, or the very bad
Yes,
news.
you are the
I will tell you from my experience working with sponsors is that they get very picky, and the transferable skills, those will show up great when you get the opportunity in the company to show them what you can do. But I have had plenty of sponsors say, no, 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 no. I need, depending on the level of position,
Yeah.
I need somebody that already has this particular experience, and here's why. Because if I hand them this project, I need to know that they're going to be able to just pick it up and run with it, right? So then the question becomes, how do I gain those skills necessary to move into the next organization?
Mm.
And then you start getting into, what level are you at, right? If look, salaries are, income wise, right? I'm going to go to that because taking the pay cut, salaries in a small biotech company are, they're up there right now.
Even
And if
right now?
you're,
Even
yeah,
now? And okay.
even right now, we're in an interesting time. That's another topic, I guess, which is you got a bear market in biotech stocks, right? Essentially.
Getting
Uh,
crushed. I got one of them on my Apple Watch. It reminds me every day. Look, it's worse today. AQST, Aquestive. Have you worked with them? Aquestive. They have this oral film for Libervant for um, acute epilepsy, which has supposed to have been FDA approved since last year, and for some reason, they keep delaying that.
no, I actually haven't worked with them.
Yeah.
But going back to what I was saying is that I noticed that a lot of these companies they have their runway secured. Many of them do, right? And they're saying, look, in order to get to here, data is king. In order to get the data that I need to hire these people to be able to do that. I have the funding now. We'll cross the bridge to get more when we get there. So they're still hiring, right? They're still moving forward. They're still, and there's money accessible, maybe not at the most favorable terms, but there's some, right? And so yeah, definitely, I see a good amount of hiring going on among across the board with biotech organizations.
That's actually good news to hear from somebody like in the trenches, basically day to day, dealing with these biotech companies.
I make
Um,
a living off hiring, so man, believe me, I'm watching it because I'm like, if I see a dip in recruiting, well, obviously I see a dip in my own personal income. So
yeah. So what you're saying is basically kind of what I think, or I thought intuitively, is like the money, the studies that they've already planned, they already have that budget. If they're going to make cuts, it's going to be future studies or other things that were on hold that maybe are going to be delayed. But the stuff they already had planned, there's still a runway for that.
yeah, it's absolutely it. It's not that's not to say that maybe they won't make some cuts. Maybe they won't scale back. Maybe the original plan was to hire 3 people and now they're only going to do 2, or maybe they're only going to do 1, depending on the size of the company for that specific function. But you know, yes, they're definitely still moving forward, definitely still hiring, and it's an interesting time, like I said, because I think, again, I'm not a definitive voice on this. I'm not a savvy, perfect investor in the world of biotech, but I personally believe that that when we see the rebound of stocks, that the depressed nature of the biotech stocks is going to go. It's going to shoot up
I hope
because
so,
I
man.
don't I don't think the activity that's happening within these companies is reflecting the value of the stocks. Is, I guess, the way I should have put that.
Yeah, I mean the intrinsic value of these companies. I mean, I look at my Apple Watch every day. It's looking ugly. Like I just got used to it now. I wake up, I look at, "Oh, okay, this thing's down again." Like
Mhm.
it's just like another day.
Yeah.
um all right, super interesting. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, like recruiter, okay?
Hmm.
That you're a recruiter. You love candidates, but let's be honest, a company doesn't hire you to bring them potential, like they don't hire you to bring like a diamond in their rough. They say, okay, well, this guy doesn't have experience, but trust me, like they're a go-getter. They're gonna do well for you. The reason biotechs or CROs hire you, the recruiter, is they have somebody in mind and they want you to find that person. And they usually give you like a rigid framework, right? Like experience is not negotiable in those cases.
Yes, I'm not hired to find Aladdin. As a reference to Disney, you guys, now that kind of lets you know what era I grew up in, right? He was the diamond in the rough. I definitely will work with those, but absolutely. I'll give you an example. I'm working on a position right now. It's confidential search, so I won't share the detail of the company and all that. But they have a need for a strong preclinical development leader, that has experience doing work not just in vitro but in vivo. They need somebody that has experience, not necessarily being the main person on an IND team, but being part of that and doing significant portions of the preclinical side of the IND. And so it's just not negotiable for this company to find somebody that they say has great potential that they can train up. It's just the nature of this
Yeah.
particular organization, right? They're a early stage company. They're small when it comes to the world of drug development, um, and so they're just not able to say, yeah, we've got great potential here, and we'll spend time training them up. Now, that's not to say that they don't do that with other positions, but this particular role, me being an executive recruiter that is being hired to find the right person for the job, I'm looking for a person that has those skills. And usually those are people that they're not looking for a job necessarily, right? They've got their nose to the grind. They're doing a great job where they're at. And my job as a recruiter is to find that person and pull them out. That being said, it doesn't mean that I don't work with people that are actively looking for a job. I do that often. So,
The reason I bring that up is for two reasons. Number one, I think you guys, recruiters, get a lot of hate, unnecessary hate from candidates who, quite frankly, are not qualified enough to be worth your time. I hate to put it that way. They're not qualified enough for you to be like, you know what? Okay, like I'm going to put you in front of this client. You might see the potential. You might, like, the good recruiters will still cultivate that relationship over the years,
hmm
right? And maybe even coach them and, hey, take this job first. And then when you're ready, like in a year, hit me up because there might be another one for you. So I get a lot of candidates that are not so qualified to reach out and say, hey, I emailed like 10 recruiters. They all ignored me. And it's like, well, they're in a business for themselves. Like their client told them they don't want people like you. Okay, so that's number one. I want to like shield you guys a little bit because you guys get a lot of flack. Number two, that doesn't mean that if you're a candidate that is not qualified, that you still can't find a way. It's just the recruiter might not be the best way, but if you find a good one, then you can start building those relationships. But you can go directly to some of these biotechs and show them, because now when they hire you, it's a little less, it's a little more risk free for them because they don't have to pay somebody to find a diamond in the rough, right? Like in
hmm
Aladdin, like you said. So that's why I bring that up. I wanted to get your thoughts on what I just said. Am I off base or or what?
No, I think so. There's a couple things that I think I want to focus on with what you just commented on. So I will say there are definitely recruiters in the industry that need to learn how to communicate better, right? And what I think a lot of people don't understand is from the third party recruiters, even internal recruiters. Internal recruiters are generally swamped and overwhelmed. They're not just finding people; they've got all this other things that the client wants them to do. Like I contracted myself to an organization once and said, look, instead of paying me a traditional, the traditional way that I would work with the client, and I only work one position for you, let's work out a number of hours a week and an hourly rate, and I'll work as a contractor for you, and I'll recruit on multiple positions for you. And I got an opportunity to see what the internal recruiters, the individuals working for a talent acquisition team inside of a company, what they deal with, and it's rough. There's a lot going on. They're expected to do all these things, and then depending on how the leader is in that organization, they might be saying, where's my candidates, where's my candidates, where's my candidates, and they're going, I got 5 jobs I'm recruiting on, like I can only do so much on each one, right? So that's number one on the internal. The external recruiters, the third party recruiters, most people don't understand there's different setups, right? There's different ways that these recruiters do business. There's your traditional uh your traditional contingent search, which is like, hey, if I make a placement for you, you pay me 20 to 30%, whatever the fee is, and like that's the risk I'll take. And the client says, well, if I don't have to pay anything at all up front, fantastic. But what ends up happening is that individual is going to now try and is going to always be looking for a new thing and always be looking to spend their time with where they feel they've got the best chance. So what ends up happening is they may submit a few people in the beginning, but then After a certain period of time, they kind of move on because they need to try and get a placement. And then you have recruiters that kind of work in the middle, which is like a hybrid, which is generally where I work, right? Maybe they do an engagement fee with a client, which is something that I'll do. Maybe they do an exclusivity and then still do the contingent model, but it's like, hey, client, you're going to give me, such and such amount of time of exclusivity where I'm the only recruiter working your job, right? And that justifies the time spent. And then you have the full retained search individuals, which are like, only I'll take my payment up front. And even if I'm unsuccessful, I still get paid and all of that. So why I share that is because those recruiters, it also affects how they work with the candidates, which is you've got candidates reaching out about jobs, and these recruiters are going, I've got 5 jobs I'm working on, and this individual may not be the fit for one of those jobs, and then they don't even think to develop a relationship with them. So I would say I appreciate the shielding, but we also do need to get better at communicating. That's for sure. So I know
Oh,
I'm
that's
taking
for
it.
sure. I won't argue that either. Like we've had plenty of videos bashing recruit. Actually, a guy I got to introduce you to this guy, Robert Goldman. But yeah, he always sends me like recruiters blind messaging him like jobs that are like 5 levels below what he's doing now. So he's like, these guys clearly didn't take the time to
Right.
learn about me. They're just doing some blast email. We make plenty fun of recruiters. I wanted to use this to like give you guys some props. Like there's two sides to every story. It's not like you guys are all bad and shady and just like going for a quick buck, because I know that's not true.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, that's funny that you would say that, because that just tells me right there that those individuals are probably just pulling a list of like names and just sending out a blast without actually looking at the person. And that
Yep.
obviously tells me they probably got a bunch of things they're working on. They're just spaghetti. What sticks?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Okay,
Yeah.
so the good news then is biotech's still hiring, CROs are still hiring,
Hmm.
small, medium, large, doesn't matter. They're still hiring. Is there still a shortage right now in October 2022 in our space?
Yes. There still is a shortage. Um, I will say that it's lessened a little bit, because there have recently, especially, and it depends which market you're in. Do you live in San Diego? Do you live in San Francisco? Are you on the East Coast? Are you somewhere, in the middle of the country? Are you in Dallas, where there's kind of a budding market going on?
Where
Like,
is it super hot right now? Like right now, like in the country.
I would say San Francisco. I would say the three main hubs are going to be Boston, San Francisco, and San Diego. At least for me, this is what I've seen. The clients that I've worked with that where been the hardest challenges hiring is definitely there. And for those of you that live in like random areas, especially from the CRO side of things, there's definitely a lot of opportunity. If you're in Florida, even in Kansas, there's an organization that reached out to me that was like, we are struggling. They do like bioprocess analysis, I think. They're struggling so hard. It's because their location, but they're established and they can't move, right? They're
Mm,
just experiencing so much growth from so many companies needing, reaching out. So yeah, I would say now, again, depending on your market, because even in the San Diego market, I do a lot of work there. Um, you've got a few organizations that have recently either sold and they're laying off all their force. The new organization's laying off all their force. Like BMS took over TP Therapeutics, I think, Turning Point, and
hmm
and they announced that they're laying off like the entire company basically. And then you have companies that have failed, and so that creates a flood of individuals into the market. But it's not like we've seen so many layoffs that there's it's gone this way. There's still a shortage.
Yeah. There's another kind of demo that watches. It's experienced researchers, so CRAs, CTMs, pharmacovigilance people, all kinds. They feel stuck in their current job. Maybe they've been in the same role like 5, 10 years, and they haven't explored the market, but they might be watching and say, well, you know what? Like maybe I'm looking for a change. something happened with COVID. Like it made everyone want to look for a change, right?
Yeah.
And recruiters are having a field day because everybody wants to switch roles right now. So, what would your advice be to these people? Like, I've been in PV at a CRO for 7 years, and maybe I can like upgrade what I do at a biotech somewhere, like a small
Hmm.
biotech. What is your advice for like someone like that?
Yeah. So um, this is a good question. It'll let me answer one of the questions you had earlier that we didn't get to because I talk so much sometimes. But
Me too.
um, okay, so number one is if you're in a CRO and let's say you're in PV, you definitely have not just transferable skills, but you definitely have skills that directly coincide with what the biotech company needs. The challenges there are that the sponsor company is going to go, yeah, you've worked at a CRO, but the depth that you maybe have to do in PV is not going to be the same. Okay, so volume is going to be number one. Number two is going to be how you present yourself, how you sell yourself. And then number three is going to be, is there anything you can do that will um, beef up your current skills? Like, can I go to Solier's and get some training in drug safety in pharmacovigilance? Right? Can I go to uh, um, wow, the name just slipped my mind right now. But there's schools that offer certificates in drug development and clinical research, right? These things, can I add something? Is it worth the cost? Can I maybe add something like that and then be able to kind of beef that up? So what I want to go to is point number two, which is how you sell yourself. So when you are one thing I will do as a recruiter, and I'll share my secrets here. One thing I will do as a recruiter is if I find a really good candidate, I'll have a great conversation with that person and I'll take notes on them and I have specific questions that I ask. And that allows me to pull marketable information out of that person.
Hmm.
And then I will put that marketable information into an email with bullet points highlighting that about this person. And then
Hmm.
I will confidentially market that person to my clients that may not even have a job opening. And I will say, I have an individual with these types of qualifications. Here's some great things that they've accomplished. And I notice your company is at this stage. Could you use somebody like this?
Hmm.
And a lot of times what I get is, hey, I'm not hiring right now, but in a couple of months, we might be follow up with me, or I am looking for somebody right now, or the people that don't respond. Why I share that is because I think if clients, or excuse me, if candidates could learn how to identify their marketable skills and then put that in a way, present themselves in a way that that's the first thing that people see, especially hiring managers. They're going to be able to get that opportunity to talk. They're going to be able to get that opportunity to share their background and overcome some of that hurdle of going from CRO to sponsor, right? Or I shouldn't say this way. It's more like this way, just
Hmm.
different,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. Hopefully that helps some people.
No, yeah, it's definitely, and I think it gives people like some optimism because I've always like been amazed. Like you've been in this industry 7, 10 years, you have no reason to complain like that you're not happy with your employer. You're we're in like a such a high demand industry. Like you don't need to be wasting your time someplace you're not happy.
Hmm.
I mean, it just baffles, like, why do you think candidates stay? Like, is it just complacency or fear or like why?
Security.
Huh. Fair
Maybe
enough. Fair
they're
enough.
they're afraid to make a change. I've had candidates turn down. I've reached out to people that that say, yeah, I'm interested, and then I share the job with them. They go do some research on the company. Well, this is a small biotech company. Their stock's not even worth $1. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to that company. And it's like, well, did you evaluate all of the other things going on with this company? Did you evaluate what it is that they're doing? Did you look at their pipeline? Did you look at the established, what they have now and where they're headed? And what I find is that there are certain people that just say, I want to work for large pharma or large CRO or wherever I'm at that I'm comfortable. I know they're stable. I'm not going to have to, I'm not worried about them going under. And so they want that security.
Mm,
That may be part of it. The other thing is too is, I mean, some people, they don't like change. And even though there may be some things that they're just unhappy with, they can't stand, they're just used to it and they don't want to have to rebuild new connections, relationships,
yeah.
those kinds of things.
That brings up a good point. I don't know which business guru coined this term intrapreneur. So like an entrepreneur, but you work for someone else.
Hmm.
But as somebody like you've interviewed like so many biotechs over the last 2 years, small biotechs. Do you think the smaller companies value intrapreneurs, like those two kind of get attracted to one another, and then as the company gets bigger, they want just more managers and like less of that entrepreneurial quality? As somebody that studies these companies' culture, do you find
Yeah,
any like commonalities?
that's a good question. And I don't know that I have a direct answer for you. I know I could probably have my opinion, um, but that's an interesting thing to think about. I don't think I've ever really thought about that from that aspect. I mean, you probably know this in general as companies do develop and become more stable and VC steps in and starts to say, okay, we've got to manage things from this perspective, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
I would say that's probably generally the case, but it probably comes down to the leaders, who's in the organization, what type of organization is it? Do they want to stay small? Do they want to get mid-size and stay that way? So
yeah.
I don't know that I could give you a definitive answer, right?
I remember a monitor. I mean, I have my opinions too. Like, I think the smaller companies tend to attract the entrepreneurs. I think they do better at the smaller companies. So I had all my examples are anecdotal, but I had a former monitor of mine. It was a small biotech, and we've worked with this biotech for like 7 years. We watched them become a big company, and then they got acquired by a giant household name. So this lady was with them the whole time, and when they got acquired at the end of the 7 years, she's like, I'm retiring. These new guys came in, the whole company culture's changed, and we're now officially big pharma.
Mm.
So it's anecdotal, but yeah, I think that's like there's something there.
It's hard with large pharma silos. I'm not knocking large pharma. If anybody ever listens to this, I'm serious. I'm not knocking them. It just depends what you want to do, right? As a
Yeah.
recruiter, look, I'm gonna look as an executive recruiter, third party recruiter. As an entrepreneur myself, you know, I I don't really work with large pharmaceutical organizations because they have a million layers and processes and things that make it hard for me as a recruiter to work directly with a hiring manager. I've gotten on the phone with hiring managers at large pharma organizations that say, we are struggling to fill this position. If you could bring me candidates, that would be amazing. But you got to talk to HR and the talent acquisition team, and especially with the larger organization, that creates challenges. And so likewise, I've dealt with clients that say, I really need somebody that has small biotech experience because if they're a VP or a senior director or a director with, say, Pfizer, not knocking Pfizer, I think I had their vaccine. The you know the silos that can be created in all the processes and all the it's like you have to do it like this, like this, like this, like this. Now, of course, that's not necessarily that it's always like that in every department, but generally I think, yeah, it's probably the case.
Yeah. It's I mean, we're gonna have to do like multiple parts to this interview because we haven't even gotten into the biz dev, like how you use LinkedIn, how I use LinkedIn. I think we'll maybe save that for part two. Like, and I don't know if you want to come on for that one because in a way you're like teaching people how you're finding your clients, which could theoretically be their people watching's employees. But I think it's interesting. I think people. Here's why I think that would be a good one. Um, People don't appreciate the work that a job recruiter does. Like they see you like a candidate sees you when you already have a client, right? But for you, that's like the easy part of the work. The hardest part is getting the clients interested in you. So I don't think candidates appreciate the amount of work it actually takes to cultivate these relationships. So I don't want to oversimplify it by saying, hey, just go on LinkedIn and message these CEOs of these biotechs and maybe you'll get lucky. Although that strategy might work, you never know,
Mhm.
and it's free. Um, so I think we should do something like that when you have time. Like maybe we'll do a part two of how you find clients, how I find clients. There's one tool I use, Zymewire. I don't know if you use Zymewire before. I get nothing from them, but ZYME. You can
Writing it down.
find. Yeah, it's really good actually. You can
Zymewire.
find. Yeah, it's a paid product. I don't remember how much we pay. We give it to Julie, who does our biz dev now. That's how we find studies like for our clients.
Mhm.
But it's a lot of work. It's not just like going to Zymewire and then like you still have to reach out. It's just like it takes one of the layers off. Like instead of clinicaltrials.gov, you use this other tool instead. Um, but clinicaltrials.gov is free and anybody can use it. And you can find,
Mhm.
I mean, man, you can find phone numbers of some of these like hiring managers on clinicaltrials.gov. They don't want you to know that, but they're out there. So I think we can do like
Well,
an
it's a little,
entire, we could
little
do a whole
clunky.
thing on that. We can do a
Yeah.
whole episode on just like biz dev, how you go about finding clients. I can tie it into how I go about finding a new study for one of my sites. And because in many ways, we are going kind of after the same people from different perspective. Like we have different objectives, but at these smaller companies, maybe there's only a dozen people. Like we're probably reaching out to the same people.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do another one and talk about it. I mean, yeah, I mean, some people might say, "Oh, well, you're sharing your secrets," right? But at the end of the day, I know there's going to be people that will probably run with some of that and make good things happen, and good for them. Um, and then there, most people though will realize that the amount of persistency and like work that it takes for me to generate a client is it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's different for me because I'm not somebody looking to get hired at a job right now, right? Sometimes that's the case if I have as I mentioned, like a candidate that I'm marketing. But I've had individuals that I've worked on contacting and marketing to find a job that reach out to me 6 months after no communication.
Wow. Yeah, it happens. It happens.
Or, uh, hey, yeah, we're gonna be needing your help soon, and you do meetings, you do phone calls, you get all this work, and then the client says, but it's in 3 months when I need it. Right. So imagine being a candidate, you're like, but it's me as a recruiter. It's like I need to figure out how can I keep that relationship cultivated because when they
Yeah.
do need help, I'll be there.
Yeah. Same thing as a site owner. We have a lot of similarity. I'm glad we did this interview, Ammon, because we have so much in common, like on the biz dev side. Like I'm a site owner, I'm looking for studies, I'm often going to these small biotechs, and sometimes I have a conversation, like I've had Zooms with some of these biotech VPs of clinical operations, and they say, hey, you know what, we are looking for sites, but we're not really starting till 12 months from now.
Hmm.
But in 6 months from now, we can do feasibility, and
Hmm.
to me, that's a win. Like, yes, that's great. But like somebody who's not into the research site business, they're like, oh, 12 months. I need a study right now. So it's a lot of work. Like we can give away the secret sauce because there is no secret sauce. The hustle is sold separately. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about
I like that. That's good.
that.
Yeah, and I'll have to have you on the show too. I think for your listeners, if you ever want to check out Biotech IQ, I know you talked
Yes.
about links. I have the biotechicpodcast.com. I know it's kind of long. I'm working on building out biotechiq.com, but the biotechicpodcast.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I do try to pump out content. You could also follow our company page on LinkedIn. But would love to have you come on Biotech IQ and put some information of what you
Absolutely,
do.
man.
So
Absolutely. And I just subscribed on Spotify to Biotech IQ, and we'll have the links underneath for Ammon's LinkedIn and the website. So everybody go check that out. Thank you so much, Ammon, for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's always nice to get a job recruiter that is transparent and hardworking. Go figure.
Much appreciated, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.